board. So get out your notebooks. Here we go. Sorry, I forgot to pull up your screen. Where did it go? There it is. All right. So here's what we've got today. We are converting to and from vertex form, finding the vertex given intercept form, and graphing in intercept form. This is actually something that shouldn't take that much time. So we have to go to and from vertex form. So from vertex form to standard, standard to vertex form. And then we've got to introduce a third form called intercept form, which also looks like it's factored or factored form. So the very first one, we talked about this yesterday, but only for a second. We rushed through it and I didn't even get to it in the other two classes. If you are converting from vertex to standard form, make sure to FOIL first. Now FOIL really means multiply this out, right? By the way, does anybody know the shortcut to doing this out instead of writing x plus 2 times the quantity of x plus 2? Does anybody know the shortcut? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if this is a shortcut, but this is what I normally do.
Yeah.
I normally so we know it's going to be ax squared plus bx plus c. So I just take x and square that already because you know it's going to be that. And then taking the coefficient, you multiply it by 2 and get plus 4x. And then you square the coefficient again to get c.
Now you said that almost perfectly. This isn't a coefficient, that's a constant, but you said it almost perfectly. All right, so what this is what you're gonna do is, because you've got this same thing twice, right? You've got it twice. You squared this one, so x squared. You drop it down, and you square the whole thing. Then you take, because you have it twice, we'd have x times 2 and x times 2, so you take 2 times this term times this term. I know that's a lot of scribble right there, so let me say it again. In this way, hopefully you guys can do this quickly when you get there. It is always going to be 2 times this term times this term. So 2 times x is 2x times 2 is 4x. That's how you get the middle term. And then you square it here. So 2 squared is 4. Don't forget about the plus 1. So on number 1, from vertex to standard form, my entire answer is x squared plus 4x plus 5. Done. Take a second and try number 2 on your own. About 15 more seconds. All right, so again, I'm going to walk you through this one. So I have to write this first, right? When I square this, it's x squared. 2 times x is 2x times negative 3 is negative 6x. And negative 3 squared is positive 9. So we FOILed first. Now we distribute. And then you combine your like terms. By the way, you don't have to show me all the work, but just don't make any silly mistakes here. Silly mistakes include forgetting about the constant, forgetting about distributing with the sign, or the silliest of all mistakes is trying to distribute that -2 to the 5 because it's not in the parentheses. But that's your final answer. That's it. Any questions? All right. Take about 30 seconds. Try number 3 on your own. Okay. Sorry, my pen just that I'm writing with just kind of fell apart. Hold on. Uh-oh. Give me a second. Sorry. Get it back together. All right, there it is. All right. So again, we've got 1/2 x squared. 2 times 1 times x is 2x. 1 squared is 1 minus 3. So distribute. So 1/2 x squared plus x plus 1/2 minus 3. Again, combine your like terms. If I already have a fraction, I could either change that to a decimal or just make this a fraction. By the way, I'd rather deal with fractions. 1/2 minus 3, get a common denominator, so that's 6/2. 1/2 minus 6/2 is minus 5/2. Questions? So pretty simple. All right. Again, so now we can go from Vertex's standard form. That's easy. Oh, come on. Now, from standard to vertex form, I'm going to teach you the easiest way to do this. There's another way to do this by completing the square. We're not going to complete the square. It's more work, more confusion than what you need to do. So all I want you to do is find your vertex. We did this yesterday. Find your A value. Not your find your value, but find your A value. Then you plug in your A, your H, and your K. I'll do number 1 with you. Oh man, I completely forgot. How in the world do I find my H value? The opposite of, somebody take it from there.
The opposite of 8 over -2 squared. I mean, -2 times 2. And then, yeah, you figure that out.
So my H value is going to be +2. So it's the opposite of B over 2A. We did that yesterday. And how do I find my K value? I have to do what?
Plug in the 2 into the equation.
Perfect. Now I gave you guys a little bit of a shortcut here. I don't care if you use the shortcut. All you're doing is you're plugging in H, or you're plugging that X value in for X. The shortcut is like this. Once you square it, 2 squared is 4, times -2 is -8. So when I put those together, I get +8 minus 25, which is -17. By the way, what was my A value? What was my A value?
Negative 2.
-2. So let me talk about this one more time. If I plugged it in, you plug it in for x. 2 squared is 4. 4 times -2 is -8. But 2 times 8 is positive 16. When I put these two terms together, plugging it in for the vertex only, it will always be the opposite of what I got when I plugged it in right here. That's just a good way to check. Make sure you haven't done anything silly. So how do you write your entire form? Y equals your A value, x minus your H value, squared, plus K. Pretty simple. Questions? By the way, does that open up or down?
Down,
How do you know it opens down?
because it's -2.
Perfect, because A is negative. Ooh, so let's do this real quick. What's my maximum minimum value? Pop quiz. What is my maximum or minimum value?
-17. It's the minimum. I mean, the max of -17.
Max is -17. Perfect. So let's see. What's my domain?
All real numbers.
All real. And what's my range?
Y is less than or equal to -17.
-17. Ooh, here's the real tough one. So again, it's increasing or decreasing. On what interval is it increasing?
From the left.
On the left, or where x is less than my H value, where x is less than 2. But once it gets right here to the axis of symmetry, it was increasing till it got there, then it's decreasing after there or on the right of it. And that's it. And by the way, that's what I mean. I kept saying on the left side of H, which where x is less than that H value. All right, little pop quiz, making sure you guys understood that. So what about number 2? Take a second. 2 is the easiest one. Try number 2 on your own. Find your vertex and your A value, and then plug it back in. Take about 30 seconds and go. About 10 more seconds. All right. The opposite of B over 2A. Your B value is -6, so the opposite is +6. Your A value is 1. So 1 times 2 is 2. So my vertex is at 3. Plug it back in. 3 squared is 9. So -9 plus 7 is -2. Questions on that part? So here's your answer. Any questions? All right, try number 3 on your own. Then we'll get to the heart of the lesson. It's pretty simple lesson. Tomorrow I'm going to show you some stuff on your calculators. I almost said so bring your calculators to school. All right. Oh boy, somebody help me with this. The opposite of B. What's the opposite of B?
-3.
What is 2 times A?
-1.
-1.
Perfect. So when you plug in 3, here's what I was talking about. People don't like to mess with fractions, and that's fine. When I plug this in, 3 squared is 9 times -1/2 is -9/2. Just keep it as -9/2. When I plug this back in, I'm going to get +9/2 minus 1, which is -2/2. So that's part of why I want you guys, and I keep talking about this shortcut. It will make it easier. 3 squared is 9 times -1/2 is -9/2. So I know when I put these together, it's going to be the opposite of that. So +9/2 minus 1, which is -2/2, makes this my ordered pair, my vertex. Any questions? And by the way, now that we're in your first higher level math class, I can tell you every math professor, every math teacher would rather deal with fractions than decimals. Fractions are more precise than decimals. Your A value is -1/2, so let's plug it in. Y equals -1/2 x minus 3 squared plus 7/2. And that's it. And by the way, if some of you guys wrote it as a decimal, remember, it would be counted wrong if you have a decimal and a fraction in the same equation. Even though the math is right, it's just not how you do it. Any questions there?
How did you find your A value again? Sorry.
It's already there, man. -1/2. So remember, it's y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Your A value is always that leading coefficient for your quadratic term. Just like up here, your A value is 1, your A value is -2. Makes sense? All right. Let's move on. So now we've got a third way. So factored form, also called intercept form. Again, your A value is that coefficient on the outside. What this is doing, what this form is doing, is telling you guys where that graph crosses the x-axis. They are also called zeros or intercepts, and that's actually what we're going to focus on in the next chapter, not the next lesson. So in about a week and a half, that's what we're going to focus on, are finding our zeros or our x-intercepts. I need you guys to understand P and Q are our x-intercepts. So again, before we do any of this, I need you guys to understand. If I have this, can anybody tell me what are my x-intercepts?
-2 and 3.
Close, but look at the signs. You still have to change your signs. So my solutions, my zeros, or my intercepts, there's a bunch of different words that I can say that are interchangeable, but my intercepts or zeros are always the opposite, always the opposite. So remember, it's what value of x makes the entire quantity equal 0. So that's why you change the sign. So what this means is, and we're going to go over all of this stuff, what this means is that if I had something like this, x minus 2, x plus 3. When I'm graphing it, that crosses the x-axis at positive 2 and negative 3. All right? Any questions? Now, let's go ahead and do a couple of these. So remember, P and Q, the opposite of what you see in here, are going to be your zeros. Your axis of symmetry, also known as your H value. It's you take P plus Q and you divide it by 2. So let's do this again. What if I gave you something like this? X minus 5 and x minus 3. What are your P and Q values really?
5 and 3.
There you go. So it's 5 plus 3 divided by 2. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. So your H value would be 4. Well, how would you find your Y value or your K value? What would you have to do? Plug it back into both of these and see what you get. Well, 4 minus 5 is negative 1 times 4 minus 3, which is 1, equals negative 1. Now, here's where you guys are going to run into trouble because none of this is difficult. It's knowing everything about all three forms. So after today, we're going to kind of take a day off. I say a day off. We're going to take a day and review all of this stuff. Make sure you guys are good. You have a quiz on Thursday. I will make sure that you guys are prepared for this. So let's go ahead and do number 1 here. And I only put 2 examples up here. Number 1, if I were graphing, what are my x-intercepts?
-1 and 3.
So -1 and +3. So we're kind of doing this all together. Now, this is the only type of graphing I'll let you guys get by with just 3 points. So now we just need to find the vertex. So you said -1 and +3. -1 plus 3 is 2 divided by 2.
Wait, it's -3 and +1.
Nope, it's backwards. It's opposite. Remember, it's always the opposite of what's going on to the x, okay? So if I have a +1 here, it has to be -1. If I have a -3 here, it has to be +3. Remember, it's what value of x makes the quantity equal 0. So how do I find my vertex? -1 plus 3 is 2 divided by 2 is 1. So what do I have to do now? Plug it back into both of them for the x. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 minus 3 is -2. And 2 times -2 is -4. So we have a vertex at +1, -1, 2, 3, 4. And that's all you have to do to graph. Oh boy, number 2, that looks fun. Take a second and try number 2 on your own. So what are my P and Q values, also known as what are my intercepts? All right, so what are my intercepts? P and Q value here for number 2 or what?
4 and 1.
4 and 1. So 1 and 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so again, the graphing part on this is easy. So 4 plus 1 divided by 2 gives me 5 halves, or 2.5. Oh man, I got to deal with a fraction. That's silly. So I don't care if you guys want to do it as 5 halves, get a common denominator. Hopefully you guys see what I did. So 4, multiply the numerator and denominator by 2. So from here, I have -2 times 5 halves minus 8 halves. Oh man, that's -3 halves. Times 5 halves minus 2 halves is +3 halves. Multiply them together. I've got -3 halves times 3 halves. That's -9/4. Which is 18/4, which is 9 halves. Guys, it's just a fraction. By the way, if you don't like it, type it in your calculator. So that's your H and K. So 5 halves is really 2.5. So 1, 2.5. 9 halves is really 4.5. 1, 2, 3, 4.5. Opens down, and that's it. All right, any questions?
So how do you know that it opens down?
You tell me, what's your A value?
Oh, right.
And we had the x-intercepts. And we now found our vertex, right? So it had to open down. If that's your vertex, which is your maximum value, and these are your intercepts, there it goes. Now, you guys might think I'm a little crazy here, but I actually think this gets fun once we get past the next section. So 2.4 is all real world problems, and we're talking about balls being dropped off buildings and rockets being launched and balls being thrown and so on and so forth. It's kind of interesting to look at these parabolic arcs. All right, your intercepts in a real world problem are where things hit the ground. Your y-intercept is where it starts. That's pretty interesting. All right, and by interesting, at least there's some application to it. But that's it. You guys should have enough to go through and do your homework now. Remember, it's not due until tomorrow at midnight. So when you go home, if you have any questions, you have tomorrow during class to ask, or you can stay after for some help. All right. Let's see. Any questions at all? Let's do this one last time. Find the x-intercepts, vertex, and graph. Well, we already kind of did some of this. Let's just do number 3 here real quick. Number 3. The reason I put that up here is because this looks different than everything else. You will see something like this. What are my x-intercepts? Does anybody know? There's still 2 of them. Does anybody have any idea?
It's one 0, and another one it's -2.
One is 0 and the other one is -2?
0, 4.
Well, first of all, why'd you say 0?
Well, it's because of the x. that's next to the 2x can be read as like 2x plus 0, or 2x in parentheses plus 0.
That's exactly right. So if we ever have this, you don't need to distribute. This is actually already in intercept form. So this is really 2x minus 0 times a quantity of x minus 4. So one of your zeros is 0. The other one has to be positive 4. Okay? So let's get rid of that. So if we've got 0 and 4, so 0 and 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and what's your A value?
Two.
Yeah, your A value is positive 2, so we know it's going to open up. But we don't really need that anyway. 0 plus 4 divided by 2. Well, 4 divided by 2 is 2. That's your H value. How do you find K? Plug it back in. So 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 minus 4. 2 minus 4 is negative 2, which is negative 8. Just like that. Any questions? So again, none of this math is hard, but now we've got 3 forms to remember. We've got vertex form, we have standard form, and now we have intercept form or factored form, okay? You should have plenty, you should have enough to do all of your homework. If you have any questions, bring them to class tomorrow, because all we're gonna do is kind of clean this up and then have a review, okay? If there's no questions, I'll stop recording.